Magdalena Cole wiped the sweat from her brow as she surveyed the damage to her small ranch house. The twister had come through Copper Creek without warning, tearing off half the roof and scattering her few possessions across the dusty landscape. Her pa would have known how to fix it, but pa was gone now, 2 years in the ground, leaving her to manage the struggling cattle ranch alone at the age of 20. The spring of 1872 had been unforgiving across the Wyoming Territory. First drought, then tornadoes, and now she faced rebuilding with hands that had never been quite right. Magdalena glanced down at them, fingers twisted and bent at odd angles, knuckles swollen and misshapen from the childhood fever that had nearly taken her life at 8 years old. The doctor had saved her but couldn't save her hands from the damage. She reached for the hammer, her grip awkward but determined. The tool slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the wooden porch. "Need some help, madam." Magdalena startled, turning to find a man on horseback approaching her property. Tall and broad-shouldered, he sat easy in the saddle, his face partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. His buckskin horse kicked up dust as it came to a stop a respectful distance from her porch. "I'm fine," she called back, hastily retrieving the hammer. "Just making repairs." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Name's Jackson Wells. Folks call me Jack. Passing through on my way to Laramie when I spotted your roof." He gestured toward the gaping hole above. "That's quite a bit of damage for one person to handle." Magdalena straightened, trying to hide her hands in the folds of her skirt. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Wells, but I've managed on my own just fine." "No doubt," he replied, his blue eyes taking in the scene. "But that doesn't mean you have to." There was something in his voice, a gentleness that contrasted with his rugged appearance. His face was weathered from the sun, a short beard covering his jaw. The six-shooter on his hip suggested he knew how to handle trouble, but his eyes held no threat. "I'm Magdalena Cole," she finally offered. "This is my ranch, Miss Cole." He tipped his hat. "I'd be obliged if you'd let me help. I was a carpenter before I took to the trail." "I can't pay you," she said bluntly. Jack smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Wasn't looking for payment. Just seems the Christian thing to do." Magdalena hesitated. Pride told her to send him on his way, but practicality whispered that she'd never manage the repairs alone. "There's water in the well if you're thirsty, and I've got some beans and cornbread for later. That's more than fair." He shrugged off his duster, revealing a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to expose sun-tanned forearms. "Point me to your lumber and I'll get started." For the next few hours, Magdalena worked alongside Jack, handing him tools when she could manage it, holding boards in place despite the awkwardness of her grip. He never commented on her hands, never stared the way most people did. Instead, he showed remarkable patience, waiting when she fumbled, offering help without making her feel helpless. By late afternoon, they had made significant progress on the roof. Jack wiped sweat from his brow with his bandana and climbed down the ladder. "We should call it a day," he said. "Lights fading." Magdalena nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she was. "The offer of supper still stands. Much appreciated." He followed her inside the half-repaired house. The kitchen had been spared the worst of the damage, though a fine layer of dust covered everything. As Magdalena struggled to light the stove, her hands refusing to cooperate with the matches, Jack stepped forward. "Allow me," he asked, not grabbing the matches but waiting for her permission. She nodded, stepping back to allow him access. "Thank you. My ma used to say that accepting help doesn't make you weak, it makes you smart." He lit the stove with practiced ease. She was a wise woman. "Sounds like it," Magdalena said, moving to retrieve the pot of beans she'd prepared that morning. As she reached for it, her grip faltered and the pot slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor and sending beans spattering across the worn wooden planks. "I'm sorry," she blurted, mortification heating her cheeks as she knelt to clean up the mess. "I'll make something else." Jack knelt beside her. "Nothing to be sorry for. Accidents happen." He helped her scoop up the spilled food, his movements unhurried. "It's not an accident," she said bitterly. "It's these hands, they've never worked right." She held them up, the twisted fingers and swollen joints fully visible in the lamplight. "They're ugly and useless." Jack surprised her by taking her right hand in his, turning it palm up. His touch was gentle, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "I see strength here," he said quietly. "I see hands that keep trying despite the pain I suspect they cause you. Nothing useless about that." Magdalena stared at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery or pity. She found neither. "Most people find them disturbing to look at. Most people are fools," he replied simply. "Now, let's see what else we can rustle up for supper." They managed to salvage some of the beans and supplemented the meal with cornbread and dried apples. As they ate by lamplight, Jack told her stories of his travels across the territories, of the 2 years he'd spent mining in Colorado, of his time working cattle drives in Texas. Magdalena found herself laughing for the first time in months. "What about you?" he asked. "How'd you end up running a ranch alone?" Magdalena toyed with a piece of cornbread. "My parents moved out here from Ohio when I was 5. Pa had dreams of building a cattle empire. We were doing all right until the fever took me when I was 8. She flexed her fingers unconsciously. "After that, Ma died of consumption when I was 16. Pa and I managed for a while, but then his heart gave out 2 summers ago." "I'm sorry for your losses," Jack said. "Life out here isn't kind," she replied with a shrug that belied the grief she still carried. "But this land is all I have left of them. I can't give it up." "Understand that well enough," Jack nodded. "A person needs something to hold on to." As darkness settled fully over the plains, Magdalena offered Jack the barn to sleep in. "It's not much, but it's dry." "Better than most places I've laid my head," he said with a smile. "I appreciate the hospitality, Miss Cole." "Magdalena," she corrected him. "You've earned the right to use my given name after all your help today." "Magdalena," he repeated, and something in the way he said it made her heart skip a beat. "I'll see you at first light. Still got a roof to finish." True to his word, Jack was already working when Magdalena emerged from the house the next morning. She brought him coffee and biscuits, which he accepted with a grateful smile. "Thought you were just passing through," she remarked as he ate. "Reckon Laramie can wait another day or 2, he replied. "Can't leave a job half-finished." They worked together throughout the day, repairing not just the roof, but also the damaged corral fence and the broken pump handle at the well. Magdalena marveled at Jack's carpentry skills, the way his hands could fashion and fix almost anything. He showed her simple tricks for holding nails that made them easier for her to manage, never once showing impatience when she dropped them. By the 3rd day, the major repairs were complete. Magdalena knew she should feel relieved, but instead she felt a growing sense of dread at the thought of Jack continuing on his journey. She'd grown accustomed to his company, to his easy conversation, and the way he seemed to accept her completely. That evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in gold and crimson, Magdalena gathered her courage. "You never asked about my hands," she said. "Most people can't help themselves." Jack took a sip from his coffee cup before answering. "Figured if you wanted to tell me, you would." "It was rheumatic fever," she explained. "The doctor said I was lucky to survive, but the disease damaged my joints. They call it rheumatoid arthritis now, makes the joints swell and twist. Some days are better than others." Jack nodded. "My younger sister had something similar, not as severe, but her fingers would swell something fierce in cold weather." "Is she still living?" A shadow crossed his face. "No, lost her in 65, influenza." Magdalena's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry." They sat in companionable silence as the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon. The air grew cooler, stars beginning to speckle the darkening sky. "I should probably get on to Laramie tomorrow," Jack said finally. Magdalena felt her chest tighten. "Yes, I suppose you should." "Unless—" he began, then stopped. "Unless what?" Jack turned to face her, his expression serious in the gathering dusk. "Unless you might have need of a hired hand around here. Seems to me this ranch is too much for one person to manage." Hope fluttered in Magdalena's chest. "I told you I can't afford to pay much. Room and board would be enough to start," he said. "I've been drifting a long while. Might be nice to stay put for a season. Just a season." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Jack's eyes held hers. "That would depend on how things go, I reckon." Magdalena felt a blush warm her cheeks. Well, the bunkhouse needs some repair, but it could be made comfortable enough. Is that a yes? She nodded. Yes, Mr. Wells, I could use a hired hand. Jack, he corrected with a smile. If we're going to be working together, you ought to call me Jack. The following weeks settled into a rhythm. Jack repaired the bunkhouse, but spent most daylight hours working alongside Magdalena. He mended fences, repaired the barn roof, and helped her move the small herd of 30 cattle to better grazing land. In the evenings, they would often sit on the porch, talking until the stars fully emerged. Word of Jack's presence at the Cole Ranch spread quickly through Copper Creek. When they rode into town for supplies one Saturday in late May, Magdalena noticed the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed them down the main street. At the general store, Mrs. Wilkins, the proprietor's wife, made no attempt to hide her interest. So, Miss Cole, I see you've hired yourself some help, she said, her eyes darting between Magdalena and Jack. Mr. Wells has been kind enough to assist with repairs after the tornado, Magdalena replied stiffly. Very kind indeed, Mrs. Wilkins said with a significant look. Your father would be pleased to see someone taking care of things. Magdalena bristled at the implication that she couldn't manage on her own, but before she could respond, Jack stepped forward. Miss Cole manages just fine, he said pleasantly but firmly. I'm just an extra pair of hands when needed. His defense warmed Magdalena even as she noticed Mrs. Wilkins' gaze fall to her twisted fingers as she counted out coins to pay for their supplies. The older woman's expression shifted to one of poorly disguised pity. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, Magdalena's mood had darkened considerably. I should have worn my gloves, she muttered. Jack secured the last crate. Why's that? You saw how she was looking at my hands. Magdalena climbed awkwardly onto the wagon seat. Like I'm some kind of curiosity. Jack took his place beside her. People fear what they don't understand, makes them act foolish. It's not fear, it's disgust. Magdalena picked up the reins. I've seen it all my life. As they pulled away from the hitching post, a group of men outside the saloon called out to Jack. Hey, Wells, when you're tired of playing nursemaid to the crippled girl, come have a real drink with us. Magdalena's face burned with humiliation. She snapped the reins, urging the horses forward, but Jack placed a hand on her arm. Hold up, he said quietly, then jumped down from the wagon. Jack, don't, she pleaded, but he was already striding toward the men, his posture relaxed but purposeful. Magdalena couldn't hear what was said, but she saw the leader of the group, Tom Ryder, a local rancher known for his mean streak, take a step back as Jack spoke. After a moment, Jack returned to the wagon and climbed up beside her. What did you say to them? She asked as they rode out of town. Just clarified a few things, he replied. Doubt they'll bother you again. Magdalena's hands tightened on the reins. I don't need you fighting my battles. Jack's expression remained calm. Wasn't your battle. They insulted me too by suggesting I wouldn't be proud to work for you. The simple statement dissolved Magdalena's anger. They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels crunching on the rutted road. My whole life, people have either pitied me or mocked me, she finally said. After a while, you start to believe what they see is all there is to you. Jack was quiet for so long that Magdalena thought he might not respond. When he did, his voice was thoughtful. When I was a boy, my pa took me fishing on the Mississippi. I caught a catfish ugly thing with whiskers and a face only its mother could love. Pa told me it might not be pretty, but it was one of the strongest fish in the river and smart too. Said appearances don't tell you much about what matters. He looked over at her. Your hands may not work like others, but they've kept this ranch going. They've built a life out of nothing but grit and determination. That's worth respecting. Magdalena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them away. No one had ever spoken about her that way before. That night, as Magdalena prepared for bed, she studied her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand. She was not unattractive. Her dark brown hair framed a face with high cheekbones and expressive gray eyes that she'd inherited from her mother. But her gaze always returned to her hands, seeing them as others did, deformed, unsightly. For the first time, she tried to see them through Jack's eyes. These hands had buried her father. They had branded calves and delivered foals. They had kept her alive and independent when many thought she should sell the ranch and move to town. Perhaps there was strength in them after all. The following morning brought rain, a gentle, soaking rain that the parched earth desperately needed. Magdalena found Jack in the barn, repairing tack. "Thought we might take a day of rest," she suggested. "Let the rain do its work." Jack looked up from the bridle he was mending. "Sounds reasonable. Been meaning to finish this batch of repairs anyway." Magdalena settled on a hay bale across from him, watching his capable hands work the leather. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My father was a saddle maker back in Missouri," Jack replied. "Taught me the trade before I left home." "Why did you leave?" She'd been curious about his past but had hesitated to pry. Jack's hands stilled momentarily. "War came. I joined up with the Union in '63, saw things no man should see. After Appomattox, home didn't feel like home anymore." He resumed his work. "Needed open spaces and room to breathe." "I understand that need," Magdalena said softly. They worked together in the barn for hours, the steady drumming of rain on the roof creating a peaceful backdrop. Jack showed her how to braid leather for a new set of reins, adapting his instructions to accommodate her hands. By mid-afternoon, Magdalena had completed her first braided leather piece, imperfect but functional. "You're a good teacher," she told him, pride evident in her voice. "You're a determined student," he replied with a smile that made her heart flutter. As the days stretched into weeks, Magdalena found herself looking for reasons to be near Jack. She enjoyed their conversations, his dry humor, and the way he approached problems with a calm practicality. More than that, she appreciated how he saw her not as a crippled woman to be pitied, but as a capable rancher who occasionally needed an extra hand. June arrived with its longer days and increasing heat. They worked from dawn until the worst of the afternoon's sun drove them to seek shade. Often, they would retreat to the cool of the house, where Magdalena would read aloud from one of her father's books while Jack whittled or mended equipment. One particularly hot afternoon, as they sat on the porch shelling peas, Jack asked, "Have you ever thought of selling the ranch?" Moving somewhere easier, Magdalena considered the question. "After Pa died, the bank manager suggested it, said a woman, especially one with my condition, couldn't manage a cattle ranch." "What did you tell him?" She smiled at the memory. "I told him my condition didn't prevent me from firing a rifle if he stepped foot on my property again." Jack laughed, a rich sound that Magdalena had come to treasure. "I would have paid good money to see his face." "It was worth the trip to town," she admitted. "But to answer your question, no, I've never seriously considered selling. This land is part of me now," Jack nodded. "I can see that. You belong here." Something in his tone made Magdalena look up from her peas. His blue eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Jack," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses. They both stood as 3 riders came into view, approaching the house at a steady clip. "You expecting company?" Jack asked, his hand moving instinctively to his hip where his revolver rested. "No," Magdalena replied, recognizing the lead rider with a sinking feeling. "That's Tom Ryder and his men." Jack stepped slightly in front of her as the riders pulled up in front of the porch. Tom Ryder was a large man with a florid face and small, mean eyes. He owned the largest ranch in the county and had been trying to buy out smaller operations for years. "Afternoon, Miss Cole," Ryder called, tipping his hat with mock politeness. "Wells." His greeting to Jack was curt, his expression making it clear he hadn't forgotten their encounter in town. "What can I do for you, Mr. Ryder?" Magdalena asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Just passing by and thought I'd make you an offer." Ryder's eyes swept over the modest ranch house. "My cattle could use the extra grazing land. I'm prepared to pay you a fair price for this place, enough for you to set yourself up comfortably in town." "Not interested," Magdalena replied firmly. "As I've told you before." Ryder's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Times are changing, Miss Cole. Small operations like yours are dying out. It's just good business sense to sell while you can get a decent price." "The lady said she's not interested," Jack interjected, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "I believe that concludes your business here." Ryder's face darkened. "This isn't your concern, Drifter. I'm talking to the property owner." Mr. Wells speaks for the ranch as well, Magdalena said, stepping forward to stand beside Jack. And I'm still not selling. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Ryder studied them both, his expression calculating. I heard you hired help, Miss Cole, but I didn't realize you'd taken a partner. His gaze flicked to Magdalena's hands, visible as she gripped the porch railing. Though I suppose with those claws, you need someone who can do a man's work. Jack moved so quickly that Magdalena barely registered it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Ryder by the shirt collar, nearly pulling him from his saddle. Apologize to the lady, Jack said, his voice deadly quiet. Ryder's men reached for their guns, but Jack's own revolver appeared in his free hand, though Magdalena hadn't seen him draw it. I wouldn't, he advised the men calmly. Now Mr. Ryder was about to apologize for his rudeness. Ryder's face had gone from red to purple. Take your hands off me, Wells. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Jack replied. A bully who thinks he can intimidate a woman because she's alone, except she's not alone anymore. Something in Jack's tone, or perhaps the steady aim of his revolver, convinced Ryder to reconsider. No offense meant, Miss Cole, he muttered. Just business talk. Jack released him, stepping back but keeping his revolver at the ready. I believe your business here is concluded. Ryder straightened his shirt, his eyes cold with hatred. This isn't over, Wells. Nobody manhandles Tom Ryder and gets away with it. He turned to Magdalena. As for you, you'll regret not taking my offer when you had the chance. With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his men following close behind. Magdalena released a shaky breath as Jack holstered his weapon. You shouldn't have done that. Man needed a lesson in manners, Jack replied, watching the retreating riders. Ryder's dangerous, she warned. He has half the county in his pocket, including Sheriff Davis. Jack turned to her, his expression serious. Are you afraid of him? Magdalena considered the question. I'm cautious. He's wanted this land since before Pa died. The creek that runs through the north pasture doesn't dry up, even in drought years. That's valuable. All the more reason not to let him intimidate you. Jack's eyes softened as he looked at her. I meant what I said. You're not alone anymore. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that neither was quite ready to address. Magdalena felt her heart racing, not from fear of Ryder, but from the realization that Jack's presence in her life had become essential. Thank you, she said quietly. For standing up for me. Jack's smile returned, warming his eyes. Anytime, Magdalena, anytime. That night, Magdalena couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the confrontation with Ryder, but more than that, she kept hearing Jack's words. You're not alone anymore. What did he mean by that? Was he simply referring to his role as her hired hand, or was there something more? She'd never allowed herself to dream of marriage or family. What man would want a wife with hands like hers? Who would willingly tie themselves to a woman who dropped dishes and couldn't button her own dresses without struggle? Even if Jack had grown to care for her, and that was a big if, how could she ask him to take on such a burden? When dawn finally broke, Magdalena rose tired but resolute. She would enjoy Jack's company and friendship for as long as it lasted, but she wouldn't let herself hope for more. It would only lead to heartbreak. As July approached, the summer heat intensified. They worked from first light until mid-morning, then again in the evening when the worst of the heat had passed. The afternoons were spent in the relative cool of the house or barn, attending to indoor tasks. One such afternoon, Magdalena was attempting to mend a tear in one of her dresses, her twisted fingers struggling with the small needle. After the third time she pricked her finger, she let out a frustrated sigh. Need some help. Jack asked from where he sat cleaning his revolver at the kitchen table. I'm fine, she replied automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, yes, if you don't mind. Jack set aside his gun and came to sit beside her on the sofa. Magdalena handed him the needle and thread. Just a simple stitch to close the tear, she instructed. To her surprise, Jack's stitches were small and even. You've done this before, she observed. A man on the trail learns to mend his own clothes or goes ragged, he replied with a half smile. Though I'll admit, dresses are outside my usual experience. Magdalena watched his hands work, fascinated by their strength and dexterity. You have good hands, she said softly. Jack glanced up at her. They're just hands, tools like any other. Beautiful tools, she murmured, then blushed at her own boldness. Jack set the mending aside, his expression serious as he took one of her hands in his. Gently, he traced the swollen knuckles, the bent fingers that wouldn't straighten completely. These are beautiful too, he said. They tell a story of survival, of strength. Magdalena shook her head. You don't have to say that. I don't say things I don't mean, Magdalena. His voice was low, his eyes intent on hers. I've watched you these past weeks. Seen how you never quit, never complain, even when I know you're in pain. That's a rare quality in anyone, man or woman. He was so close she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. Magdalena felt dizzy with his proximity, with the warmth of his hand still holding hers. Jack, she whispered, not knowing what else to say. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, his lips met hers in a gentle kiss that stole her breath. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, and Magdalena leaned into his touch, returning the kiss with a fervor that surprised her. When they finally broke apart, Jack rested his forehead against hers. Been wanting to do that for a while now, he admitted. Why didn't you? She asked, her voice barely audible. Wasn't sure you'd welcome it. His thumb stroked her cheek. Wasn't sure I had the right to ask for more than you've already given me. Magdalena pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. What do you mean? You gave me a place to belong, Magdalena. After years of drifting, that's no small thing. The simple honesty in his words touched her deeply. You gave me something too, she said. You made me feel like more than my hands, like someone who matters. You matter, he said firmly. Don't ever doubt that. He kissed her again, and Magdalena felt as though something long frozen inside her was finally beginning to thaw. The following days were filled with stolen glances and brief touches as they went about their work. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the quiet companionship. Occasionally, Jack would read aloud from one of her books, his deep voice bringing the stories to life in a way that made Magdalena's heart swell with affection. They were careful to maintain propriety as Jack still slept in the bunkhouse, and they were always mindful of appearances when they rode into town. But in private moments, their growing feelings for each other were impossible to ignore. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jack turned to her with an unusually serious expression. There's something I need to tell you, he began. Something about my past. Magdalena felt a flutter of apprehension. All right. Jack took a deep breath. After the war, I didn't go straight to drifting. I worked as a deputy marshal in Kansas for a few years. He paused, made some enemies in that line of work, men I helped put away, some who swore revenge. Is that why you move around so much? Magdalena asked, beginning to understand. He nodded. Safer that way, for me and for anyone around me. Are you in danger now? Jack's expression was grim, not specifically, but staying in one place too long increases the risk. Magdalena absorbed this information, her heart sinking. So you'll be moving on soon. That was the plan, he admitted, but plans change. He took her hands in his, careful of her sensitive joints. I don't want to leave, Magdalena, but I need you to understand the risk of my staying. She looked down at their joined hands, his strong and capable, hers twisted but no less determined. I'm not afraid of risk, Jack. I live with it every day. This is different, he insisted. If someone from my past tracked me here, then we would face it together, she said firmly. Unless. A new thought occurred to her. Unless you're using this as a gentle way to take your leave. Jack's expression softened. No, Magdalena, if I wanted to leave, I'd say so plainly. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. The truth is, I'm finding it harder each day to imagine leaving you. Relief flooded through her. Then don't, he smiled, but his eyes remained troubled. It's not that simple. Nothing worth having ever is, she replied. Before Jack could respond, they heard the distant sound of galloping horses. They both stood, instantly alert. It was nearly dark, too late for casual visitors. Get inside, Jack said, his hand moving to his revolver. Lock the door. I'm not hiding in my own house, Magdalena replied, moving inside only long enough to retrieve her father's shotgun from above the fireplace. Jack gave her an exasperated look, but didn't argue further as 5 riders came into view. Even in the fading light, Magdalena recognized Tom Ryder at the lead. The men pulled up in front of the house, spreading out in a loose semicircle. "Evening, Wells," Ryder called, his tone falsely pleasant. "Miss Cole, state your business, Ryder," Jack replied, his stance relaxed but ready. "Thought I'd make one more offer before things get unpleasant." Ryder's smile didn't reach his eyes. $5,000 for the ranch, Miss Cole, that's more than fair." "Not interested," Magdalena called back. "As I've told you repeatedly," Ryder's smile disappeared. "That's unfortunate, because you see I've had a chat with Sheriff Davis about your hired man here." He focused on Jack. "Seems you're a man with a past, Wells, or should I say Deputy Marshal Wells." The sheriff found that mighty interesting. Magdalena felt Jack tense beside her. "My past is my business," he said evenly. "Not when it involves a reward for your capture," Ryder replied. $500 for information leading to the whereabouts of Jackson Wells, wanted for questioning in the death of a prisoner in his custody in Dodge City. Magdalena looked at Jack, whose expression had hardened but revealed nothing. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "The prisoner died," Jack confirmed, his eyes never leaving Ryder. "But not by my hand. He was shot trying to escape during transport." "That's not how I heard it," Ryder said. "Story is you executed him because he killed your friend." "You heard wrong," Jack replied, his voice cold. "There was an inquiry. I was cleared." Ryder shrugged. "Sheriff Davis seems to think it's worth looking into. He's on his way out here now with a couple of deputies." His smile returned triumphant. "Unless, of course, Miss Cole reconsiders my offer. In which case I might forget I ever saw you, Wells." Magdalena's grip tightened on her shotgun. "Get off my property, Ryder, now." "Your loyalty is touching, Miss Cole," Ryder sneered. "But misplaced. You're harboring a wanted man." "He's not wanted," she retorted. "You said yourself he's only wanted for questioning." "Same difference out here," Ryder replied. "Man runs, people assume guilt." He turned to Jack. "What'll it be, Wells? You going to let the lady lose her ranch because of you?" Magdalena saw the conflict in Jack's eyes and stepped closer to him. "Don't listen to him," she said fiercely. "This is my decision, my ranch." Jack's gaze met hers, a silent communication passing between them. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod before turning back to Ryder. "Seems to me you're trespassing, Ryder," Jack said calmly. "And making threats against the property owner. Sheriff might be interested in that too." Ryder's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, both of you." He jerked his head at his men. "Let's go. We'll let the law handle this." As they turned to leave, he called back. "Think about my offer, Miss Cole. It won't stay open forever." They watched the riders disappear into the gathering darkness. As soon as they were out of sight, Jack turned to Magdalena. "Pack what you need," he said urgently. "We need to leave." "What, no?" Magdalena shook her head. "I'm not running from my own home." "Magdalena, listen to me." Jack took her by the shoulders. "Sheriff Davis is in Ryder's pocket. If he comes for me, it won't be just to ask questions, and I won't put you in the middle of that." "I'm already in the middle," she replied. "This is my fight too now." Jack ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You don't understand. Ryder doesn't just want your land. He wants me gone one way or another." "Why?" Magdalena demanded. "What did you do to him?" "Nothing yet," Jack replied grimly. "But men like Ryder can smell opposition. He knows I won't let him intimidate you, and that makes me a problem." Magdalena considered this. "If we run, he wins. The ranch would be vulnerable. If we stay and things go bad, we could lose much more than the ranch." Jack's eyes were pleading. "Please, Magdalena, at least until we can sort this out." She looked around at the home she'd fought so hard to keep. The thought of abandoning it, even temporarily, made her chest ache, but the fear in Jack's eyes was real. "Where would we go?" she asked finally. Relief washed over Jack's face. "I have a friend about 30 miles north, former marshal too. He'll help us." Magdalena nodded, decision made. "I'll pack some food and clothes. You get the horses ready." They worked quickly, moving with the efficiency of people accustomed to handling emergencies. Within 20 minutes, they had 2 horses saddled and packed with essential supplies. Magdalena took a last look at the house before mounting her mare. "We'll be back," Jack promised, reading her thoughts. "This isn't over." They rode north under the cover of darkness, pushing the horses as hard as they dared on the uneven terrain. Magdalena's hands ached from gripping the reins, but she said nothing, focusing instead on keeping pace with Jack. After several hours of hard riding, they stopped to rest the horses beside a small stream. While the animals drank, Jack studied Magdalena's face in the moonlight. "Your hands are hurting," he observed. She flexed her fingers, wincing. "They'll manage." Without a word, Jack reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small tin. Opening it, he scooped out a salve that smelled of camphor and herbs. "Give me your hands," he said softly. Too tired to argue, Magdalena held them out. Jack gently rubbed the salve into her swollen joints, his touch firm enough to work the medicine in, but gentle enough not to cause additional pain. "Where did you get this?" she asked, feeling the warming effect begin to ease her discomfort. "An old Cheyenne woman made it for me after I helped her son," Jack explained. "Said it was good for aching joints. I've carried it ever since for my old war wound." He tapped his left thigh. "Takes the sting out on cold nights." "It helps," Magdalena admitted. "Thank you." Jack finished the impromptu treatment and recapped the tin. "We should keep moving. Still have a ways to go." They continued their journey through the night, the vast Wyoming sky ablaze with stars. Despite the circumstances, Magdalena found a strange peace in the rhythm of travel, in Jack's steady presence beside her. Dawn was breaking when they finally approached a modest homestead nestled against a hillside. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting the occupant was already awake. "That's Daniel's place," Jack said. "He'll help us." As they rode into the yard, the front door opened, and a tall man with silver hair and a shotgun stepped onto the porch. His weathered face broke into a grin of recognition when he saw Jack. "Well, I'll be damned," he called. "Jackson Wells, as I live and breathe." Jack dismounted, approaching the man with an outstretched hand. "Daniel, good to see you. Been what, 3 years?" Daniel clapped Jack on the shoulder before turning his attention to Magdalena. "And who's this lovely lady?" "Magdalena Cole," Jack replied. "Magdalena, this is Daniel Harker, former U.S. Marshal and the best tracker west of the Mississippi." Daniel tipped his hat to her. "Miss Cole, any friend of Jack's is welcome here." His eyes narrowed as he took in their travel-worn appearance. "Though I'm guessing this isn't a social call." "We need a place to lay low for a few days," Jack confirmed. "Got some trouble breathing down our necks." Daniel nodded, unsurprised. "Figured as much. Come on in. You both look like you could use some coffee and a hot meal." Inside, the cabin was simply furnished but comfortable. Daniel's wife, Sarah, a warm-faced woman with kind eyes, immediately set about preparing breakfast while Daniel and Jack talked in low voices by the fireplace. Magdalena sat at the kitchen table, fatigue washing over her now that they had reached safety. Sarah placed a cup of steaming coffee in front of her. "Drink this, dear. You look dead on your feet." "Thank you," Magdalena replied gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. She noticed Sarah's glance at her twisted fingers but appreciated that the woman made no comment. "How long have you known Jack?" Sarah asked conversationally as she worked at the stove. "A few months," Magdalena replied. "He showed up after a tornado damaged my ranch and stayed on to help." Sarah smiled knowingly. "That sounds like Jack, always helping strays, human or animal." "I'm not a stray," Magdalena said, perhaps more sharply than intended. "Of course not, dear," Sarah amended smoothly. "I only meant Jack has a good heart, always has." She glanced toward the men. "Though it's not often I've seen him look at someone the way he looks at you." Magdalena felt her cheeks warm. "We're friends?" Sarah's smile widened. "If you say so." She turned back to the stove, tactfully changing the subject. "Hope you like flapjacks, they're Daniel's favorite." After a hearty breakfast, Daniel showed them to a small bedroom off the main living area. "You can rest here, Miss Cole. Jack can bunk with me in the spare room." "Thank you for your hospitality," Magdalena said sincerely. "Any enemy of Tom Ryder's is a friend of mine," Daniel replied with a wink. "Man's been a thorn in the side of decent folks for years." Left alone, Magdalena sank onto the narrow bed, exhaustion overtaking her. Despite her racing thoughts, she fell into a deep sleep almost immediately. She woke several hours later to the sound of men's voices outside the window. Rising stiffly, she peered out to see Jack and Daniel by the corral, deep in conversation. Jack was gesturing emphatically, his expression serious. Daniel nodded, occasionally offering what appeared to be words of caution. Magdalena splashed water on her face from the basin on the dresser and smoothed her rumpled clothing as best she could before joining Sarah in the kitchen. "Feel better?" the older woman asked. "Much, thank you," Magdalena replied. "Is there anything I can help with?" Sarah handed her a knife and a bowl of potatoes. "You can peel these if your hands are up to it." Magdalena appreciated the woman's matter-of-fact approach to her disability. "They're fine for this," she assured her, taking up the knife. They worked together companionably, Sarah chatting about local gossip and her children, now grown and living in Colorado. Magdalena found herself relaxing in the woman's motherly presence. "So," Sarah said eventually, "what's the plan? Jack mentioned trouble with Ryder, but not much else." Magdalena sighed. "I'm not entirely sure. Ryder wants my ranch has for years. Now he's using Jack's past as leverage." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That business in Dodge City was a raw deal. Jack did nothing wrong but mud sticks, especially out here where rumors travel faster than truth." "You know about it?" Magdalena asked, surprised. Daniel was still with the marshals then. He testified at the inquiry. Sarah's expression grew serious. "Jack was cleared completely, but some people like Ryder only hear what they want to hear." Magdalena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had believed Jack's account, but having it confirmed by someone else eased a worry she hadn't fully acknowledged. "What will happen to my ranch while we're gone?" she asked, voicing her greatest concern. Sarah placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Daniel and Jack will figure something out. Those two have faced worse than Tom Ryder." The men came in shortly after, their expressions suggesting they had reached some sort of agreement. Jack's eyes immediately sought Magdalena, a smile softening his features when he found her. "Feeling better?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Yes," she replied, though worried about the ranch. Jack exchanged a glance with Daniel. "We've been discussing that. Daniel thinks we should send a telegram to the territorial marshal in Cheyenne. He's no friend of Ryder's and he outranks Sheriff Davis." "And in the meantime," Magdalena pressed. "In the meantime," Daniel interjected, "I have a few friends who owe me favors. They'll keep an eye on your place, make sure Ryder doesn't get any ideas about claiming abandoned property." Magdalena's shoulders sagged in relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Daniel cautioned. "Ryder's not the type to give up easily. This may get worse before it gets better." Daniel's prediction proved accurate. 2 days later, a neighbor brought news that Sheriff Davis had indeed come looking for Jack at Magdalena's ranch. Finding it empty, he'd posted a notice on the door declaring Jack a fugitive from justice and demanding he surrender himself to the county authorities. "They're also saying you're his accomplice," the neighbor, a grizzled prospector named Hank, told Magdalena, "running from the law and such." Magdalena's face flushed with anger. "That's ridiculous. I've lived in that county my entire life. Everyone knows me." "Ryder's been spreading stories," Hank continued. "Saying you and Wells are more than just employer and employee if you take my meaning." Jack's expression darkened. "Trying to ruin her reputation to pressure her into selling." "Likely so," Hank agreed. "But there's more. Word is, Ryder's bringing in some hired guns from Cheyenne, mean-looking fellows, according to what I heard in town yesterday." Daniel stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Sounds like he's escalating, making it personal." "It became personal the moment he threatened Magdalena," Jack said, his voice hard. "I'm not hiding out here while he destroys everything she's worked for." "What are you suggesting?" Daniel asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. "I'm going back," Jack stated firmly. "Tonight I'll deal with Ryder myself." "Jack, no," Magdalena protested. "That's exactly what he wants to draw you out." "She's right," Daniel agreed. "We received word that the territorial marshal is on his way, should be here within a week." "A week might be too late," Jack argued. "If Ryder's bringing in gunmen, he's planning something big." Magdalena stepped closer to Jack, placing her hand on his arm. "We go together or not at all," she said quietly. "It's my ranch, my fight." Jack looked down at her, conflict evident in his eyes. "It's too dangerous. So is letting you face it alone," she countered. "I've never run from a fight in my life, Jack Wells. I'm not starting now." A smile tugged at Jack's lips despite the gravity of the situation. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Thank you," she replied primly. Daniel cleared his throat. If you two are determined to go back, at least don't go alone. I'll come with you. Sarah shot her husband an exasperated look. Daniel Harker, you promised me your days of chasing outlaws were over. Ryder's not an outlaw technically, Daniel replied. And I'm not chasing him, just helping friends stand their ground. Sarah's expression softened. Well, when you put it that way. She turned to Magdalena. You bring him back in one piece, you hear. I've spent 30 years breaking him in, and I'm too old to start training a new husband. Magdalena smiled at the older woman's humor. I'll do my best. They spent the rest of the day preparing for their return journey. Daniel sent Hank to another neighbor's ranch with messages for his friends, ensuring they would have additional support when needed. Jack checked and cleaned their weapons, his expression grave as he worked. That evening, as they sat around the fire making final plans, Jack pulled Magdalena aside. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. What is it? She asked, concerned by his serious tone. Jack took her hands in his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. When this is over, assuming it goes our way, I'd like to stay, not as your hired hand, but as… He paused, seeming to search for the right words. As someone with a permanent stake in the ranch and in your life. Magdalena's heart skipped a beat. Are you asking what I think you're asking? A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I'm not doing this very well, am I? He took a deep breath. Magdalena Cole, I've fallen in love with you. With your strength, your determination, your kindness. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me. Tears pricked at Magdalena's eyes. Even with my hands, even knowing what a burden they can be, Jack's expression grew fierce. Your hands are part of you, and I love all of you. They're not a burden, they're a testament to your courage. He brought her right hand to his lips, kissing each twisted knuckle with reverence. These hands have held on when most would have let go. They're strong enough for anything strong enough for me. Magdalena felt tears spill down her cheeks. No one had ever spoken of her hands with such admiration, such tenderness. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you, Jack Wells. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of promises and future joys. When they finally broke apart, Magdalena saw Sarah watching them with a knowing smile before tactfully turning away. We should get some rest, Jack said, reluctantly releasing her. We leave before dawn. The ride back to Magdalena's ranch was tense but uneventful. They traveled cross-country, avoiding the main roads where Ryder or the sheriff might have men watching. Daniel led the way, his years as a tracker evident in the confident manner he chose their path. They approached the ranch from the north, using a stand of cottonwoods as cover while they assessed the situation. The property appeared quiet, though smoke rose from the chimney of the main house. Someone's made themselves at home, Daniel observed grimly. Jack nodded, his expression hardening. 3 horses at the hitching post, could be Ryder's men. How do you want to play this? Daniel asked. Jack considered for a moment. Direct approach. Whoever's in there is trespassing on private property. We have every right to ask them to leave. And if they refuse, Magdalena asked. Then things get interesting, Jack replied, checking his revolver. They rode openly into the yard, alert for any sign of danger. The front door of the house opened as they approached, and a man Magdalena didn't recognize stepped onto the porch, hand hovering near his holstered gun. That's far enough, he called. This property's under the protection of Mr. Ryder. Is that what you call trespassing these days? Jack replied evenly, not slowing his approach. Protection? 2 more men appeared in the doorway behind the first, both armed. Daniel subtly shifted his position to cover Jack's left side, his own hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. Miss Cole, the first man acknowledged with a nod that held no respect. Mr. Ryder said you might come back, said to tell you his offer still stands. I'm not selling, Magdalena replied firmly, and you're trespassing on my property. I want you gone, now, the man smirked. Afraid we can't do that, madam, we have orders. Your orders don't supersede the law, Daniel interjected, his voice carrying the authority of his former position. I'm Daniel Harker, former U.S. Marshal. What you're doing constitutes criminal trespass. The men exchanged uncertain glances, clearly not having expected to face a former lawman. Before they could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Tom Ryder rode into the yard, followed by Sheriff Davis and two deputies. "Well, well," Ryder called, his face splitting into a triumphant grin. "The fugitives return, and look, Sheriff, they've brought reinforcements." Sheriff Davis, a small man with a perpetually sour expression, dismounted slowly. "Jackson Wells," he announced formally, "you're wanted for questioning in connection with a death in Dodge City, Kansas." "That matter was settled years ago," Jack replied calmly. "There was an official inquiry. I was cleared of all wrongdoing. Nevertheless," Davis continued, "I have a duty to investigate any credible allegations brought to my attention." He turned to Magdalena. "Miss Cole, you're also facing potential charges as an accessory for harboring a fugitive." Daniel stepped forward. "Sheriff, I was personally involved in the Dodge City investigation. Wells is telling the truth. There are no outstanding warrants for his arrest." Davis shrugged. "That may be, Harker, but until I receive official confirmation, I have to take him in." His hand moved to his revolver. "Now, are you coming peacefully, Wells, or do we have to do this the hard way?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "Seems to me this is more about Ryder wanting Miss Cole's land than any concern for justice." Ryder's smile disappeared. "Watch yourself, Wells. Sheriff's asking you nice-like." "I wouldn't test his patience." Magdalena felt her anger rising. "This is still my property," she declared loudly, "and none of you have the right to be here without my permission." "Property rights get complicated when the owner is facing criminal charges," Ryder replied smugly. "Sheriff might need to place this land under county supervision until matters are resolved." "That's not how the law works, and you know it," Daniel growled. "This is nothing but a land grab using the badge as cover." Tension crackled in the air as both sides assessed each other. Magdalena saw Jack's hand hover near his gun, saw the same readiness in Daniel and the men opposing them. This could quickly turn deadly. "There's no need for bloodshed," she said clearly, moving her horse forward. "Sheriff Davis, if you truly believe Jack needs to answer questions, I'm sure he'll cooperate provided he receives fair treatment." Jack shot her a surprised look, but she continued before he could speak. "However, there is absolutely no legal basis for removing me from my property or placing it under any kind of supervision." Sheriff Davis looked uncomfortable. Despite his allegiance to Ryder, he was still an officer of the law, and Magdalena was calling his bluff in front of witnesses. "No one's talking about removing you from your property, Miss Cole," he said, backpedaling slightly. "Just bringing Wells in for questioning. And these men," she gestured to Ryder's hired guns still standing on her porch, "are they part of your official investigation?" Davis glanced at the men, clearly irritated by their presence. "No, they are not." "Then they need to leave immediately," Magdalena insisted. "They're trespassing." Ryder's face darkened with anger. "Now see here." "She's right, Tom," Davis interrupted, apparently unwilling to completely abandon legal procedure. "Your men have no official standing here." A tense silence followed as Ryder glared at the sheriff, clearly not having anticipated this turn of events. Finally, he jerked his head at his men. "Go on back to the ranch," he ordered. "I'll handle this." The men reluctantly complied, mounting their horses and riding off, but not before giving Jack and Daniel menacing looks. "Now," Davis continued, turning back to Jack. "About coming in for questioning." "I'd be happy to answer your questions, Sheriff," Jack replied reasonably, "but I'm not surrendering my weapon, and I'm not sitting in a cell while you send telegrams to confirm what I've already told you." Davis bristled. "You're not in a position to make demands, Wells." "Actually," a new voice called from the edge of the yard, "I believe he is." All heads turned to see a man in a long duster riding toward them, a U.S. Marshal's badge gleaming on his chest. Behind him rode 4 deputies, all armed and alert. "Marshal Thompson," Daniel called, relief evident in his voice. "You're earlier than expected." "Got your telegram," Thompson replied, seemed urgent enough to make haste. He surveyed the scene with experienced eyes before focusing on Sheriff Davis. "Having some trouble, Sheriff." Davis's Adam's apple bobbed nervously. "Just doing my duty, Marshal, following up on information about a potential fugitive." "Would that be Jackson Wells?" Thompson asked mildly. "Former deputy marshal with a distinguished record who was fully cleared in the Dodge City incident." He shook his head. I reviewed the file personally before riding out. There are no outstanding warrants or charges against him. The color drained from Davis's face. I was informed otherwise. By whom? Thompson's gaze shifted meaningfully to Ryder, who had gone very still. There appears to have been a misunderstanding, Davis mumbled. A convenient one, Thompson remarked. Especially given Miss Cole's valuable water rights that Mr. Ryder has been trying to acquire. He dismounted, his presence commanding despite his average height. Sheriff, I suggest you return to town and review your understanding of proper legal procedure. Using your badge to help a land grab is the kind of thing that ends careers. Davis nodded, thoroughly cowed. Yes, Marshal. Thompson turned to Ryder. As for you, Mr. Ryder, I'd recommend you pursue your business interests through legitimate channels in the future. Criminal harassment and abuse of legal process are serious matters. Ryder's face contorted with barely suppressed rage. You have no jurisdiction here, Marshal. This is county business. When it involves potential civil rights violations and corruption of local law enforcement, it becomes federal business, Thompson replied coolly. Would you like to discuss it further at my office in Cheyenne? I have plenty of room in my jail. The threat hung in the air. For a moment, Magdalena thought Ryder might actually challenge the marshal, but finally, the rancher's shoulders slumped in defeat. This isn't over, he muttered as he turned his horse. For your sake, Mr. Ryder, I hope it is, Thompson called after him. Because next time, I won't be so understanding. They watched as Ryder and Sheriff Davis rode away, followed by the dejected deputies. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Magdalena allow herself to breathe normally again. Marshal Thompson approached them, shaking Daniel's hand warmly. Good to see you, old friend, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Couldn't have timed your arrival better, Daniel replied with a grin. Thompson turned to Jack and Magdalena. Mr. Wells, Miss Cole. Daniel's telegram explained the situation, but I'd like to hear your version of events as well. They spent the next hour giving Thompson a detailed account of Ryder's harassment and threats. The marshal listened attentively, occasionally making notes in a small book. I've had my eye on Ryder for some time, he admitted when they finished. There have been similar complaints from other small ranchers in the area. Your situation might just give me what I need to build a case against him. Will he really back down? Magdalena asked skeptically. Thompson's expression was thoughtful. Men like Ryder calculate risk versus reward. Right now, the risk of continuing to harass you outweighs the potential reward. He glanced at Jack. Especially with a former deputy marshal guarding your interests. I appreciate your help, Marshal, Jack said sincerely. Least I could do for a fellow lawman, Thompson replied. Besides, Daniel would never let me hear the end of it if I didn't come through. He smiled at his old friend before turning back to Magdalena. Miss Cole, I'll station 2 of my deputies here for the next week, just as a precaution. After that, I believe Ryder will have moved on to easier targets. Relief washed over Magdalena. Thank you, Marshal, for everything. As Thompson and his men set up camp at the edge of her property, Magdalena finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day's events. Her legs trembled as the tension drained from her body, and she might have fallen if Jack hadn't been there to steady her. It's over, he murmured, drawing her into his arms. You're safe now, the ranch is safe. Magdalena leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. We're safe, she corrected him. Both of us. Jack smiled down at her. Yes, both of us. He glanced toward the house. Looks like Ryder's men made themselves comfortable. We should check the damage. Inside, they found the house in disarray but largely intact. The men had helped themselves to Magdalena's food stores and left dirty dishes piled in the sink, but nothing appeared to be permanently damaged or stolen. Could have been worse, Daniel observed as he helped them straighten the furniture. Much worse, Magdalena agreed, remembering how close they had come to losing everything. That evening, after Daniel had joined Thompson and his men at their camp, Magdalena and Jack sat alone on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Jack's arm was draped comfortably around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. I meant what I said at Daniel's, Jack said softly. About staying, about us. Magdalena smiled, contentment flowing through her. I meant my answer too. Jack shifted to face her, taking her hands in his. Then I think we should make it official. His expression grew solemn. Magdalena Cole, will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner in everything. Yes, she whispered, her heart so full she could barely speak. Yes, Jack Wells, I will marry you. He kissed her then, a kiss that sealed their promise and spoke of the future they would build together. When they finally parted, Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. I've been carrying this for a while, he admitted, opening his palm to reveal a simple gold band. It was my mother's. I'd like you to have it. Magdalena stared at the ring, unexpected tears filling her eyes. It's beautiful. May I? Jack asked, holding the ring poised above her finger. She nodded, holding out her left hand, the hand with the most severely twisted fingers. Jack didn't hesitate, gently sliding the ring onto her gnarled ring finger. It fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. See, he said softly. Perfect. Magdalena looked down at her hand, the twisted fingers now adorned with a symbol of love and acceptance. How did you know it would fit? Jack smiled. I measured while you were sleeping at Daniel's. Sarah helped. Sneaky, Magdalena laughed, leaning in to kiss him again. 2 months later, on a crisp October day, Magdalena stood before the small church in Copper Creek, wearing her mother's wedding dress and holding a bouquet of late-blooming wildflowers. Jack waited for her at the altar, his eyes never leaving hers as she walked down the aisle on Daniel's arm. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the time came to exchange rings, Magdalena felt a moment of self-consciousness as she extended her twisted hand toward Jack. But as he took it in his, kissing each bent knuckle before sliding on the gold band, she saw nothing but love and admiration in his eyes. With this ring I thee wed, he said clearly, for all to hear. These hands are strong enough for me, strong enough for anything life brings us. Tears of joy blurred Magdalena's vision as she repeated her vows, placing a matching band on Jack's finger. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the small congregation erupted in cheers. Even Mrs. Wilkins from the general store dabbed at her eyes, her earlier pity for Magdalena transformed into something like respect. Tom Ryder had left the county shortly after Marshall Thompson's intervention, his influence diminished by the scandal. Without his shadow looming over them, the townspeople had gradually come to accept Jack and to see Magdalena in a new light. At the small reception held at the ranch, Sarah Harker hugged Magdalena tightly. I told Daniel the first day I met you that Jack had finally found his match, she said with satisfaction. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. How's that? Magdalena asked, curious. Sarah smiled, like you hung the moon and stars just for him. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Jack pulled Magdalena aside. Happy, Mrs. Wells? He asked, his arms encircling her waist. Very, she replied, leaning into him. Though I'll miss being called Miss Cole. You'll always be the formidable Miss Cole to me, he assured her with a grin. Just with a different last name. Magdalena laughed, lifting her face for his kiss. Her wedding ring caught the late afternoon sunlight, gleaming gold against her twisted fingers. Once she would have hidden her hands in shame. Now she wore them proudly, adorned with the symbol of Jack's love. They mocked her crooked hands, Jack had said in his wedding vows, loud enough for everyone to hear. But I saw their strength. I saw the woman who owns them, brave, determined, loving. These hands built a life when others would have given up. These hands are strong enough for me. In that moment, for the first time in her life, Magdalena truly believed it. 1 year later, Magdalena stood on the porch of the ranch house, now expanded with a new wing built by Jack's skilled hands cradling their infant son. Jack rode in from the north pasture, a smile breaking across his face at the sight of his family. How are my two favorite people? He called, dismounting and securing his horse. Waiting for you, Magdalena replied, shifting the baby so Jack could see his sleeping face. He just dozed off. Jack climbed the steps and gently kissed her before placing another kiss on their son's forehead. Strong little fellow, he observed proudly, just like his mother. Magdalena smiled, looking down at her hands still twisted, still occasionally painful, but now capable of so much more than she'd ever imagined. They had built a ranch, found love, and now cradled new life. As Jack's arm slipped around her waist, she leaned into his strength. grateful for the man who had seen beyond her hands to the woman within. Together, they watched the sun setting over their land, their home secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them hand in hand, strong enough, indeed,